This is a talk that I first gave to the Native Plant Society. It was triggered by comments by the late, great Dave Steffen, who talked about taking care of insects in your gardens and preserving them. So basically, what I'm going to talk about is the ways that we can help with insects. I mean, we're all concerned right now about the loss of insects. I mean, this is worldwide. Used to be that you had to clean your windshield, and you don't have to clean your windshield much anymore because there are very few bugs. And so this is something that you can do at the local personal level to sort of help to improve the lives and the likelihood of survival of insects. So, we think of insects as pests, but in fact, very few of the insects that are around us are pests, either on us or on plants. There are lots of good insects, including pollinators that go all the way from bees down to even beetles. People think beetles are pollinators. Well, all of those beautiful gingers, hexastylus and asarums that you have these little pitchers at the bottom, and they are beetle pollinated. And of course, we have predators and parasitoids of insects that also help to control problem bugs. So this is a picture of my garden a couple of days ago. And as you can see, I leave the leaves, and all of the plants, you can see bloodroot and Japanese ferns, epimediums, a number of other ferns, hostas, daffodils, etc. They all manage to get through the leaves just fine. So, think about I hear people say, I can't leave the leaves because plants are not going to be found. Well, if you do leave the leaves, you can just tease them away right from the very tops of plants as they come through. So why do you want to leave the leaves? Well, first of all, you're maintaining populations of beneficial insects. That's the pollinators and the predators, because a lot of them are overwintering just either at the soil surface or just below the soil surface. So when you clean off your garden, you're basically disrupting habitat for all these guys. And of course, another bunch of insects that overwinter, usually is pupae, in that very low level of leaves in your yard, are Lepidopterus larvae. And some of them are pupae. And we're not so keen on some of them. Some of them we think are really beautiful. But the fact is that for birds, this is really important food. And many predaceous insects will also be depending upon those larvae or pupae that they can find. And of course, and this is the mulching mantra, mulch really helps to retain moisture, and it keeps down weeds. And of course, as it breaks down, it improves your soil. And we all know this. There are, believe it or not, 558 known species of bees. And I say known because there may be some we haven't found yet. Only one of our species of bees is eusocial, and that is the European honeybee, which of course was brought over by early colonists because honeybees produce honey, which human beings like as a sweetener. So what makes them eusocial? Well, they have a reproductive division of labor. That is that there may be sterile casts, and so they're workers. They have overlapping generations, so sisters are taking care of sisters, and they cooperate in the raising of young. But there are 555 species of bees that are native to North Carolina, and over 200 of those nest in groups in the ground, including bumblebees, of which we have 15 species. And these are primitively eusocial, which means that they hang out in the general same place. They often share a nesting hole so that they can share guard duty. but they don't have to, so they don't each have to be guarding their own sites. We also have sweat bees, and which are much smaller bees. They are also primitively eusocial. Andrena mining bees are colonial. These fellows are in the ground. This is some of the ones that we find as a pest in lawns, although I don't find them a pest. And leafcutter bees, which are also colonial. So, but most of our native bee species are in fact solitary. That is, that they live all by themselves. They do this job of laying eggs and provisioning them and having those larvae grow up all on their own. And about 70% of them nest in the ground. Now, this is not a solitary bee. This is a bumblebee, and this is why we want to leave our leaves. She's going to nest. She's going to overwinter just below the ground surface. So we clean up our leaves, we rake them up, and we put down some sort of triple shredded mulch, which is going to pack down and not let the water through. And we've disrupted overwintering sites. Well, also in the ground are ants. And ants actually, although we can find them pesty, are good guys. There are 192 species in North Carolina. 16 of them are introduced, but only about 30 of them are actually considered pest species. And I want to say a little something about carpenter ants, because we think of them as pests, but in fact, carpenter ants eat fungi that are eating moist wood. So if you have carpenter ants in your house, your problem is not that the ants are there. The problem is that the moisture is there. So the moisture is allowing fungi to develop, and the ants are eating the fungi. Acrobat ants and pavement ants are largely imported. They are not native at all. Is there anything to say? Oh, and so although ants are generally predators, some of them will gather grains and seeds, and others will concentrate on sweets, as we know, such as nectar and honeydew. And here we see an ant farmer. And basically, she is collecting honeydew from these aphids, and she will come over and she will tap the aphids. And you can see, is this my pointer here? Yes. See the little cornicles right there at the end of the aphid. So they're going to be dripping honeydew because when they feed, they tap into a plant's phloem, and there's so much pressure in that phloem, there's no way they can process all of that. So a lot of it just comes out the rear end. And so the ants will tap on the aphid, and that will stimulate them to produce honeydew. The ants will then collect it and take it down to their nest. Now, what's really cool is, do the ants eat the honeydew? No, they feed it to fungi that metabolize the honeydew, and they eat the fungi. So, it's a complicated web, and it's pretty neat. So also overwintering in the ground are the paper wasps that we actually find problematic. This is paper wasps, yellow jacket in the center, and hornets. This is the European hornet over here on the right. Now, these we often find problems because of their nests, but in fact, they are really important predators. They are chowing down on a lot of caterpillars and a lot of other insects that are problems. And what they will do is they will lay eggs, and you can see here a larva in a comb, and they will be putting pieces of caterpillar in there with the larva, and then they will seal it over. You can see here's a sealed comb, and the larva will finish developing, pupate, and come out. So these guys are actually doing some good work, important as predators. And there are also a number of solitary wasps, and many of them are predatory. So this is a flower wasp, a scoliid. And interestingly, what they do is they will look for beetle grubs in the ground by smell. They will go down. They will dig a hole, find a grub, lay an egg on the grub. The larva will then eat the beetle grub and come out, pupate, come out just at the time when the beetles are ready to lay their eggs again. And so they are perfectly keyed in with the cycle of our Japanese beetles and June beetles and other scarab beetles that are grubs in the ground. And of course, we also have these beautiful thread-waisted wasps, and they may construct a whole bunch of different nests. But these are the mud daubers that we see oftentimes. That they have these great channels of mud up, and we call them aerial because they're up at a height. And they are doing the same thing. They, in fact, also are provisioning their nests with dead insects. So, and they're overwintering as solitary queens because most of our bees and wasps in our climate cannot maintain a colony in the winter. So they just go down to individuals that overwinter and then come out. And of course, also in the ground are ground beetles. There are a lot of different carabids in North Carolina. This is a caterpillar hunter. It's really a gorgeous beetle. And it is actually important as a predator. Interestingly enough, carabids, although they're mostly predaceous, will also sometimes eat seeds. There was a study done fairly recently in eastern North Carolina in some agricultural fields where they said, if you don't till early, you don't disrupt the beetles, and the beetles are going to eat your weed seeds and you'll have fewer weeds. It's like, oh, well, imagine that. Now I'm going to talk about why you want to leave dead stalks of plants. Because some solitary bees and some wasp species actually will lay eggs just the way the other insects may be laying eggs in a paper wasp nest or something. They will lay them inside a hollow stem and provision it. And of course, the flower heads, when you leave them through the winter, will provide seed for birds. So here's a picture I took a couple days ago of my garden, and you can see Joe Pye weed on the right. You can see the cut off stems. Here's one. There's another one over here. This is Appalachian ironweed, and you can see all the stems that I have left here. And you see the new stuff is coming up. This, of course, is celandine poppy, which is completely soft and deciduous. So you get no stems left over. So this is information that comes out of Xerces Society. I have some of their handouts that are printed out up here. They have a lot of information about maintaining bee habitat in your yard. So basically what they're saying is that here in the spring, what you've done is you cut back your stems, and these teeny tiny carpenter bees or others will nest. They'll put in an egg and they'll put in some pollen, then they'll put in a little bit of green stuff, and then they'll put in an egg and some pollen and green stuff, and they will stack it up. During the summer, while the new growth develops, these little girls or boys are also developing in those cut stems during the summer. So you're not cutting off those stems. You're leaving them all through the year. Then in the fall, you have your old cut stems. You have what were flowers here are now dead. And the bees are hibernating in those dead stems. This is the year before stems. Then in the spring, you cut off your newer ones and you let the cycle begin again. Meanwhile, these girls have finished pupating and they have come out of the stem. So by leaving stems on a lot of your woody perennials, you will be providing nesting habitat for a number of stem nesting bees. And this is the small carpenter bee. And when I say small, I mean really small. And she is, as we saw, overwintering in those pithy stems. And then she's coming out, and you can see here in this picture, these are pictures from Xerces Society, that there's a probably a pupa or an adult about to emerge from one of these nests. And then, of course, we have the large carpenter bees that we all know and love. So they are, in fact, really important pollinators, although we think of them as pests. In the old days, before there were human structures that they would live in, and this is the fascia of my potting shed. And you can see they have been using this for years. A lot of these are really old. I see we got two girls here. They're coming in, they're laden with pollen. They're coming in and they're going to go into these holes. They will reuse a lot of these same tunnels over and over again. They're important pollinators, and they will also nest in dead stems of woodies. And you can tell it is a carpenter bee instead of a bumblebee because carpenter bees have bald butts. Okay, so there's no hair on the abdomen of a carpenter bee, whereas a bumblebee has a fuzzy abdomen. And I mentioned trimming the branches on your trees. Not only does it let carpenter bees find a place to live besides in your fascia of your house, but it also provides places for insects to overwinter. And that's important bird food for a lot of our birds. And you see woodpeckers out there in the winter, and they're not eating the wood. They're looking for bugs. So what's out there under the bark? Well, there are many moth larvae or pupae. And I say larvae or pupae because some leps will overwinter as larvae, and some of them will overwinter as pupae. The stink bugs, our native stink bugs, overwinter in the bark of trees. Now, we also have, of course, the brown marmorated stink bug, which cannot survive our winters and tries to get into our houses. And we becoming very familiar with that one in the fall when they're all trying to come in, and then in the spring when we find them all trying to get out again. A lot of our leaf hoppers are native aphids. Many of our aphids actually come in from southern climes earlier in the spring, as soon as we begin, our vegetation turns green. But some of our aphids will overwinter here in the bark of trees. Bark beetles, of course, are chowing down there. This is all good bird food. And another topic on tidying up your garden is those spider webs. Now, this is a string, and I apologize for the clarity of this picture, is the best my phone could do, that is between two branches. And here we have egg sacs that are on that thread that the spider has put out. So, think about when you're tidying your garden, how much you really need to tidy and how much you can just let be, because these spiders are good predators. I wanted to say a word or two about mulching. I think I'm talking really fast. Okay. So one of the really important things about mulching is weeds. When people clear the ground because they're preparing to mulch or they're preparing to plant something, those weed seeds that are in that soil are getting light. And as soon as they get light, it's like that is the trigger for germination. So if you're weeding, what I do actually when I weed is I will have a bucket of leaf mold. there. So as I clear a spot, I throw a handful of leaf mold right on top of that soil. So that soil does not see the light of day. And if you don't pick up your leaves, you're doing the same thing all the time. I mentioned leaf mold. Leaf mulch really is the gold standard. It has so many advantages. It's got a lot of microorganisms in it, which are really good for soil health. It settles very gently on your plants as opposed to a chips or something that just go boom. And of course, it means you're not disrupting things. And I mentioned here to move your pile in midsummer. I leave the leaves on my gardens, but my pathways and my driveway, I do collect the leaves on, and I put them into big piles. And I discovered serendipitously a few years ago that the pile's not ready, the pile of last fall's leaves are not ready yet. They will be ready next year. But if I leave them right where they are, what happens is that all the roots of the trees start to get into it. And then you go to collect your leaf mulch and you can't get it because of your roots. So right now, or sometime during the summer, take that pile and just pick it up with a pitchfork and throw it in right next to it. And you will have done enough so that you will not get roots into it the next year. Chips, they're great for paths, but if you're going to put them down, first I would suggest that leave your leaves. Just put a dusting of chips on top of your leaves. Don't clear your leaves. There's no reason to do that. And I understand, people do it, especially when they've got a new planting area and they have nothing there. And so they'll, especially around woodies, they'll put in chips. Chips are a lot slower to break down, and they don't provide all of the nutrients that as quickly as leaves do. So around new plantings, they say 2 to 4 inches for weed suppression. 4 inches is absolutely a max. And if you're thinking of trying to maintain your gardens, just put down 1 inch or so. You can do it. Here's a picture of my leaf pile, and that's my dog Pippin. But you can see here is the remnants of the last year's leaf pile, and that is gone now. But that was really good leaf mold. And then this big pile here, I will then move down to the left to let it finish maturing this year. So next year I will have some great leaf mold. Word or two about lawns. Personally, I think we shouldn't have them. Lawns are great for play areas. If you're going to have games, you're going to have sports, you're going to have little kids who need to play in an area. That's a good reason to have it. But lawns are not native here. And when we maintain a lawn, oftentimes we're trying to maintain a monoculture. We're using a lot of pesticides. We're mowing it. We're using gasoline. I mean, it's just... Anyway, but there are a lot of our bee species, and I mentioned the mining bees. Here's a mining bee here, cellophane bees and sweat bees. These all nest in areas where you have lousy lawn, and they are not stinging insects. They don't want to bug you. They just want to make a living. And so if you can, and you see you have a population, because these girls are colonial, so they will be in a whole mess of them together. Think about leaving it. They are, again, good pollinators, and they will thrive in lousy lawns. Water. It's really important that you have a water source available for birds. Also, if you have honeybees around, other insects also will. I mean, you can even see butterflies. You'll see them a little puddle on the ground. Water is important to maintain. Where am I going here? Wait a second. Oh, and another thing to think about is the use of pesticides. We particularly neonicotinoids, which have a really bad name. Neonicotinoids are systemic. Oh, I need to speak up. Okay, so neonicotinoids are a systemic pesticide, and they are, in fact, I have learned, often used in the nursery industry. So when you buy a plant that doesn't have any holes in the leaves, the reason is that when they've been growing that plant, they have been using a neonicotinoid. The plants will outgrow it, but the reason neonicotinoids have such a bad rap is because it is systemic. So it goes into all the leaves, it also goes into the pollen, and it goes into the nectar. So if you're providing neonicotinoids in the nectar or the pollen, you are killing your pollinators. So you just, think about that. Also, in lawns, when people use weed and feeds, oftentimes there are insecticides in the weed and feeds because nobody wants Japanese beetles and nobody wants the scoliid wasps in there parasitizing them. But look at what you're putting on your lawn. If you're going to use stuff in your lawn, be sure you don't have an insecticide in there. And this is a picture of a milkweed, the carnata, the red one, which is just coming up in my garden. You can see all of the little stems, and you can see all of last year's leaves hanging out there. So, leave them if you can stand it. Leave these stems. Leave the seed heads in the fall, cut your stems back in the spring, early. In North Carolina, we're talking like January, February. And your plants will come up through it. And this is a picture taken by Kathy Burton, another master gardener. It is also architecturally pretty. Leaving that stuff can be great. This is a yarrow, which during that, what was it, January we had the snow? Anyway, so there are some references that I alluded to. The study that was done on ground beetles is here. I have here on the table Mary Gardner's book on good garden bugs. And also, I do suggest that if you're interested in trying to maintain pollinator habitat, that you think about Xerces Society. A lot of people say, I want a pollinator garden and I want to put in butterfly weed. Well, butterfly bush. Butterfly bush, what is the name of it? It is Buddleia, thank you, is not a native. It's very pretty. It does spread all on its own. It doesn't provide any food source for caterpillars. So if you're thinking about really supporting your caterpillars, you want to think of supporting your butterflies and your moths and all of that, you need to be providing food for them, which they will eat. Nobody eats Buddleia. They come to the nectar. There's plenty of pollen and nectar there, and that's why you have so many bees over it. But they are not supporting your caterpillar populations, which sort of leads to a Doug Ptolemy talk when I am not going there right now. So that's it. And I will now entertain any questions. Do you see them on your chat? Yes.
So, when is it okay to cut back some of the dead stems? I mean, y'all always show a picture of how pretty it is with the snow on it. We get snow once a year.
Yeah, I know.
But the whole rest of the winter, I'm looking at ugly right next to my front door.
That's true. That's true. And
so if I cut the stems back and I don't shred them, if I place them in a pile and on the top of the brush pile or something nearby, is that still okay?
No, it needs to be, those stems need to be upright in order to be providing habitat. for these solitary bees, what have you, they need to be upright. So you may well decide that next to your front door, you ain't gonna let them stay because it's aesthetically not pleasing. But where you don't have to look at them, you know, let them be. And I know they can, January, February, because that's when your bees will be finishing their maturing and they'll be coming out and they'll be looking for new places to land. So that picture,
because it does get really hard to cut back new growth, cut back the old growth once the new growth has started.
Yes,
triple the work.
right. So you can see, yeah, and I know, and I've been there and said, oh, damn, I should have done this sooner. But here you can see that my milkweed is just coming up. It isn't even up at the height of these guys that I have cut off.
But it is okay to cut it back like just before the new growth starts or something, or January, February.
January, maybe a little early. It depends on the year. You know, if we have real warm spells, insects are going to break dormancy and they're going to be coming out. But if it's really cold, January may be too soon. But January, February, even possibly March. But you're right. You do want to be nipping them before you have to be getting in there individually cutting this because your new growth is taller than you want your stems to be. And your stems, leave them at about a foot or two, you know, and they say, oh, make them all different heights. It's aesthetic. Mine are chopped off all at the same height. I mean, I just grabbed hold of it and went, that was it.
So we can hear the online audience. We do have the speakers going, but it looks like we do have a question here in person too.
Okay. I have pine trees.
Yeah.
And I get lots and lots of pine straw, not leaves. Is that the equivalent of?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes, it is somewhat. The pH is different. Right. pH of pine straw is lower than, like, especially of oak leaves. But yes, it does the same thing. Part of the secret is that it covers the ground, and B, it is so light as it falls that it's not crushing anything. So things can work their ways through it. I mean, you can see, I really have not cleared my leaves, and everything manages to get through.
Because I can go down the first layer of pine straw and then like 3 layers.
It's really rotten.
Underneath.
Great stuff.
Okay.
They were talking about pine needles online as well.
Oh, okay.
So, got a couple questions here. We'll take you first.
Well, at the beach, it's live oak trees, and that's prickly mulch.
Yeah, and hollies can be really prickly mulch too. And I have
to work with it.
Yeah, I mean I think I recognize you.
Yeah.
Look at your mouth with your mask. I couldn't do it.
Tanya had a question?
Yes. Hi. You discussed voles. I'm sorry. We were discussing how to be very careful about what you place in ground. But what would you suggest? My husband, I've not allowed him to place the vole pellets, but our garden is just where we have voles everywhere, and it's sacrificed a lot of bulbs. But I am concerned about the earthworms, and all of the other solitary bees. And is there that are in the ground? Is there some sort of compromise, or is it let the garden die?
Well,
or the voles?
Voles are a problem. I don't know anybody who doesn't have a problem with voles, and what I have personally discovered is that voles don't like ferns. So I put in a bunch of hostas in one area last year, 2 years ago. Oh, it was COVID time. I did. It probably was. And they got demolished by voles. But I had another area where my hostas are doing great. And what's the difference? And it turns out to be that area also has a lot of ferns. Voles don't like ferns. So there are ways to work around the voles. There are also these baskets that are sold, which are kind of expensive, but you can plant inside these baskets. As the roots get out, yeah, so these are,
He bought these things on Gold Drops.
no, I'm talking about when you plant, you put this basket in this wire mesh, like 1/2-inch square stuff. I haven't actually seen it. Effie was talking about it. I don't know.
But you can also plant in permatil, which is very expensive, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's another
Basket
choice.
things, I think. About 2/3 permatil with your soil when you plant the plant.
But the Gold pellets, they do kill. I mean, they are, my concern is the poison.
Now I know there's like Rosol and stuff like that. And the problem with some of those is I don't think it's so much the worms, but as the voles ate it and they're not doing well, they come up and a hawk comes along and says food, and that hawk eats the Rosol. So that's my concern with doing that. Plus, of course, your dog will say, "Oh, look at that."
No one said it here already yet, but
Yeah.
how about planting bulbs that they don't enjoy eating? Don't plant tulips. Don't plant crocus. How
daffodils.
about
They don't
planting
like
some
daffodils.
Yeah.
They don't like
Go crazy
Spanish
daffodils.
hyacinths, but you may rue the day you planted Spanish hyacinths.
Yeah.
I found.
Hey,
ice.
Chris, I have something to say. It's Suzanne.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
2 things. The voles, I've used the I Must Garden vole and mole. It's little pellets that go across because they love these irises that I planted, and it seeps down in there. It's all natural stuff. I mean, it's all. I mean, when you say natural, it's all like cinnamon and things like that. So it's not poison. And then the other thing that I've discovered, and this is my own theory, that voles in the wintertime don't like to be cold. So if I have a big shrub, I'll sometimes rake or blow away the leaves from the base of that tree or shrub about a foot out, because they'll just come under those leaves and eat the bark. And I've had some big things fall over. So I started doing that, just rake them up. I don't remove them. I just rake them back from that part of it.
I would presume that you could move them back just a few inches from your stem and not disrupt all of it. Just give it a little collar of zone, which is not.
Yeah.
And of course, the voles use the mole tunnels.
All right.
Voles don't tunnel. They go through loose stuff or somebody else's tunnel. So if you find mole tunnels, now moles are eating earthworms and grubs and everybody else they can find in the ground. But if you stomp your mole tunnels, you are also preventing the voles from using them.
Well, that's a lot of talk about animals versus the insects for an insect talk.
Well, that's okay.
Any questions about insects?
No, that's okay.
Question back
Tony?
here, Louise.
So I have two insects that I have issues with: yellow jackets and carpenter bees. Is there any creative ways to discourage them while maintaining the other populations?
Well, I understand from my reading that if you keep a wood well painted, the carpenter bees will not get in. Now, that picture I showed of my fascia board, you could see that stain was nearly gone. It was just also harder woods. Like I'm thinking that when I yank that fascia board, I will replace it probably with a piece of oak. They don't go into oak. They don't like hardwoods, and keep it painted. And so, you can't really beat them. You can sort of skirt them. And as far as the yellow jackets are concerned, if it's near your house in the evening when everybody is in, because they're not going to fly at night, go out there with your flashlight and Oh, yellow jackets are in the ground. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, go out there and you can use a wasp spray into their area and eradicate them. If you can stand it, let them be. But I understand they can be in, traffic areas and you don't want them. Or you have a lawn and they're there and you're concerned about being stung. Yeah.
I have found too, with the carpenter bees, you use trap crops sometimes to get whatever you don't want on this plant to go over there. I have found if you put up a couple of logs or fence posts, something in the corner where nobody's going to see it, an untreated, really attractive fence post, the carpenter bees would rather use that.
Yeah, they'll look
treated boards of the house.
Yeah, they'll look for the best
there instead of going to my house.
That's a clever idea.
And it worked.
And of course, carpenter bees, we saw them going laterally, but they will go whatever direction the wood grain is. So if your wood is up and down, they'll go up and down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will they go in mushroom bogs?
If they're rotten enough, if they're soft. I mean, the catch is soft.
Or a point where it's too soft?
Yeah. When by the time you get the Pesticide beetles, those great big bark beetles in there, chowing down and they're on the ground, it's mush. It needs to have some structure.
So this is
With carpenter bees on the fascia board on my shed, on the back side of it, which is the shady side, but they were demolishing it, and I didn't want to use a spray, etc. So what I did is I hung up wind chimes back there from on a nail that was on the fascia board, and the breeze, I think it's the vibration that makes it work, but I had no new holes from carpenter bees after I hung up the wind chimes.
That's interesting. I have a wind chime right next to where that fascia is demolished.
Well, what I read was that if you hang it up on the board that they're making the holes in, then that transfers the vibration. You know what I mean?
Okay. Well, I need a bigger wind chime.
And they don't like the vibration because that must mean there's a predator or something. I don't know.
That could be.
So it's something to try, maybe.
Can I go back to this is Suzanne again, back to the yellow jackets, which are a horrible thing, but they're not horrible. They're wonderful. Have you ever had a sandwich, you're eating outside with some sort of a meat sandwich, and all of a sudden there they are. They're after protein. And what I do is I make a sign that says, if it's in a place that's, off the path, I make a sign that says, beware yellow jackets, and put it next to that hole. And I just made a new parking area with a log pile, and they got into this log pile. So I went out and I got some parking cones and put it all around there about 10 feet away, along with my sign, so that they could go out and forage for those insects. If we didn't have those ones that forage for insects, we'd be knee deep in dead insects.
Absolutely. And I should mention also that interestingly, the yellow jackets cannot eat what they're collecting directly. They have to feed it. This is the way you get your colony to survive. They have to feed it to the young, who then regurgitate it for the adults. So the adults are not eating directly. So they are encouraged to feed their young so that their young will feed them. And in the fall, they can be really, really pesky because they're not producing any more young and they're starving. And that's when you find you're about to take a bite of your sandwich and you've got 4 of them on there because they're trying to get something.
I have a technique that I used for a yellow jacket nest. I do what Suzanne said. If it's in a place where I can avoid, I mark it and just avoid it. But I had I'm extremely allergic to their stings because I've been stung way too many times. And they made a nest right next to my mailbox. So that puts me and the mailman at risk, mail carrier. So what I did was I had a large glass, mine was a vase, but any large glass jar. And if you do this at dusk or at dawn when most of them will be down in the ground, and you turn it upside down over that nest. And they will, it's sad, but they will all starve to death because they can't get out. You have to cover every entrance that you can see to their nest. And it's sad, but I wasn't using any chemicals. I wasn't killing anyone else in the soil there. But it was a nest that I couldn't tolerate, in a spot I couldn't tolerate. So that's an idea that's chemical free.
Sounds like a clever solution, and it could be decorative. Choose your vase as well.
So may I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm online. Thank you for your great talk. I've learned a lot. I'm all about all of this. Around our house, we have a farm on 12 acres, but right around the house, we have very, very large, all kinds of oak, hickory, white pine, just a lot of trees. So in the fall, we get feet of leaves down, and we don't, we leave kind of the lawn wild. My husband will mow when it gets, too tall, but we have lots and lots of weeds that flower, and the bees are just everywhere. But we can't, do you have a suggestion on how we should, because what we do in the fall is that my husband has a big blower, like a golf course blower, to blow the leaves, because it's like so many leaves, and we just put them off to the margins.
You might also think about a mulching mower. I know people who actually near me who have a lot of oaks over their lawn, and they use a mulching mower, and they just all those bits go right back down into between the grass, and you're helping to fertilize your grass, and you're keeping the leaves more or less where they were. Although running a mower over it is probably a little tough.
Right. We do use a mulching blades on our mower. But like I said, when it's feet, we have to move them. But then the rest that are down, like a lot stayed on the ground. So I guess we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, I think there's always a point at which you have to sort of weigh your choices. It's like with the yellow jackets. Yes, I'll let them be here, but they can't be there.
Yeah. Well, I've read that some bats will overwinter in piles of leaves too. So we do pile them up, along the fence line and stuff like that. So, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
So we have one question here online in the chat. How about if we treat that as the last question, Louise?
Sure.
Okay. The person has a ground cover, and it just happens to be the right, but I don't think it really matters what ground cover it is. And it's just forming a nice thicket, and wondering if that's detrimental to insects that nest in the ground. And I can just think of the ones in my yard. The insects seem to like the thickets of ground covers, and they kind of use that as protection and just hide in it. That's where mine have always been. So
yeah, I think so. I think that ground covers are fine. The insects will work around them. And some of them, like some of the beetles, will maybe eat the roots. Some of them won't eat the roots. But if you have a good thicket of liripa, you can probably afford to lose a few strands. But I don't think a ground cover is a problem. Yeah. Now you may want to, if you want to see your ground cover, need to go in there and sort of rough it up a bit with your hands to get the leaves to fall through it so that it's not all the way covered, because photosynthesis does require light. And so if things like cardinal flowers, if those basal rosettes get completely covered, they're going to get really chlorotic, and they're going to have a hard time. So if you have a plant that has a basal rosette, you might want to tease your leaves away from the rosette.
Or if you have Lisa's leaves, get out the golf course blower.
Yeah, that's industrial.
Well, thanks, Louise, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Oh, we have someone else.
There's one more
that was
question.
the last one, but we have one more.
This is Joan calling from or listening in from Michigan. I'm past president of the Meadowbrook Hall Estate, which is the Dodge Wilson Estate at Oakland University in Rochester. And we maintain the 16 gardens there at Meadowbrook Hall. Anyway, what we do with the bees and so forth is we wear a dryer sheet. Take one of your dryer sheets, fresh one, put it in your belt loop, and the bees will not come near you. We also have used them if you're sitting out in the patio, attach it to the umbrella underneath it, and the bees will not be coming for your wine. So just a suggestion.
Well, I never heard of that. They probably don't like the smell. I know that personally, I use a lemon eucalyptus oil insect repellent, which is organic. Not that organic is necessarily good, because so is nicotine. But the idea of having a smell which repels insects can be really successful. And if you're around honeybees, don't eat bananas, because bananas, I think it's the amyl acetate, is when a bee stings you, she leaves this odor of banana on your skin. So you do not want to be eating bananas while you're messing with honeybees. Other bees aren't bothered, but honeybees, yes.
Thank you so much, Louise. And thank you, everyone, for joining us online. We really appreciate it. And of course, the great group of people here at the Arboretum. So glad you could be here. We offer the Master Gardener lectures once a month, except for November and December. They're on the 4th Monday of the month. We'll be back again in May. See you real soon. Have a great week and enjoy spring. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.